They promised a new age, one where heroes came in every form, every voice, every shape. One where the spotlight would be shared, the stage widened, the crown passed. We waited as the dust settled and the credits rolled, hoping the next face would not just inspire, but endure. But what we got was a whisper in a thunderstorm. A brief glimpse of brilliance, swallowed by silence. A powerful presence, muffled beneath formulas and fragments. Stories that opened with fireworks, but ended with footnotes. Arcs trimmed to fit in margins already full. The women of Marvel weren't written to rise, they were written to support, to lift the legends but never become them. To carry grief without resolution, power without purpose, identity without intimacy. They stood tall, but were never allowed to fall. And in that refusal to break, they were never truly built. It's not about flaws, it's about freedom. To be bold, to be wrong, to learn, to love, to lose. To cry without shame, and fight without restraint. To be more than a symbol, more than a statement, more than a balancing act on a corporate checklist. They deserve arcs, not appearances. They deserve to echo. Still, some moments pierced the veil. A glance, a gesture, a monologue that mattered. A flash of truth before the lights dimmed again, and those flashes stayed with us. Not because they were enough, but because they reminded us of what should have been constant. Of what we're still waiting for. In this video, we're peeling back the polished surface to expose the cracks. We'll walk through the triumphs and the betrayals. The characters who soared, despite the scripts that failed them. The choices that hurt more than helped. And we'll ask what it truly means to write women with power, pain, and presence. It started with potential, wild and untamed, like a spark waiting to ignite a storm. Marvel stood at the edge of a cinematic revolution, whispering promises of change, of balance, of power. Fans leaned in, eyes wide, wondering how these stories would unfold, how heroines would rise alongside legends. It felt like we were on the cusp of something new, something bold, something beautiful. But instead of rising, something hesitated, something stuttered, something dimmed. We watched Black Widow move like a ghost through a universe she helped build. Always present, always vital, yet always secondary. She carried the weight of gods and monsters without the glory, without the headlines, without the credit. Her solo film came not as a celebration, but as an afterthought. A relic wrapped in grief. A farewell gift she never got to open herself. Then came Captain Marvel, bursting through clouds with the force of a comet. But even she felt like a symbol more than a soul. Her journey dictated not by growth, but by expectation. Audiences were told to be inspired before they were given a reason to care. Her strength was undeniable, yet her presence felt curated, controlled, polished to the point of sterility. She was a queen with no kingdom, a torchbearer with no path. Each new heroine arrived with a whisper of hope and a storm of discourse. Not because they weren't worthy, but because the stories didn't let them breathe. They were introduced with weighty titles and world-shaking powers, but rarely with flaws, rarely with nuance, rarely with the kind of humanity that makes a character immortal. Instead of being allowed to stumble, they were forced to stand tall from frame one, and the weight of perfection crushed their potential. Marvel had the keys to something real, something raw, something transformative. But somewhere along the way, they chose posture over personality, politics over people. The screen was wide, the budget limitless, the fan base hungry. And still, the women of Marvel were written as shadows of what they could be. Reflections of an idea, never the idea itself. We were told to wait, to trust, to believe the payoff would come, that each sideline moment was a seed, each delay a design. But years passed, and the roots never broke ground, and the fruits never bloomed. They gave us silence, then spectacle, but rarely story. And somewhere in that empty space, something cracked. She-Hulk arrived with swagger, a show about agency, about contrast, about control. But instead of unpacking her journey, it made her a meme. The humor was loud, but the soul was missing. Scenes mocked the very idea of depth, as if caring was a punchline. Her identity was chopped into segments, her legacy flattened for irony. There's a grief in missed chances, a quiet ache in what could have been. We watched as potential turned to performance, and brilliance was reduced to background. Every time a heroine stood at the edge of greatness, the ground gave way. And that fall wasn't cinematic, it was silent. Wanda Maximoff should have been mythic. Her story held madness, love, loss, and rebirth. But instead of exploring her trauma, they made her a plot device, a villain wrapped in tragedy, a mother written as a warning. Her fall had no nuance, only noise. Her redemption, if it ever comes, will feel like a rewrite, not a resurrection. Shuri carried a crown she never asked for, and in her sorrow there was poetry, but the film around her forgot to breathe. Instead of letting grief guide her growth, They gave her armor, not healing. Scenes raced, moments blurred, and her pain became a backdrop for bombast. The silence left by T'Challa was thunderous, but her answer felt muted. Jane Foster returned as Mighty Thor, and her journey could have been iconic. A woman facing death with a hammer in hand, choosing valor over fear. But her arc was sped up, glossed over, drowned in neon and noise. What should have broken hearts barely scratched the surface, and then she was gone, before we truly knew her. We mourn not just the stories we were told, but the ones we weren't. The battles not fought, the tears not shed, the truths not spoken, because somewhere inside each of these women was a saga waiting to be sung. And Marvel forgot how to listen. But there were glimpses, flashes of brilliance that lit the dark. Moments where Marvel remembered that women are not archetypes, they are storms, they are roots, they are revolutions. And when those moments came, they shook the screen. Yelena Belova didn't ask to be loved, she earned it. With sarcasm like a blade and sorrow like a heartbeat, she walked into every scene fully alive. She was broken, but never weak. Funny, but never foolish. A reminder that humor doesn't erase pain, it often hides it. And in that contrast, she thrived. But maybe the next chapter can be different. Maybe the silence was the prelude, not the finale. Maybe the voices rising now will echo loud enough to reach the writers' rooms, the boardrooms, the sets. And maybe this time, they'll listen. There are heroines waiting in the wings. Women with stories untouched, waiting to bloom. Echo, Ironheart, Storm, Jean, Rogue. Each carrying worlds inside them. Each holding truths the universe needs. And if they are given the room to bleed, to stumble, to shine, they can reshape everything. This isn't a call for quotas. It's a call for character. For arcs that stretch like symphonies. For dialogue that cuts deep. For pain that isn't hidden. For strength that isn't hollow. The audience doesn't want perfection. We want honesty. We want women written not to impress, but to matter. The world has changed, and with it, the expectations. Representation is not about numbers, it's about narrative. It's about making sure that when the credits roll, these characters don't fade. They linger, they live, they inspire. The hope isn't in what Marvel has done. It's in what it still can do. If it chooses to tell stories with heart. If it chooses to risk being real. If it chooses to make space for voices it once only echoed. Because right now, Marvel stands at a crossroads. It paved itself. A universe built on legacy now questions the path it forged. And in the reflection of its heroines, we see the fracture. Not in them, but in the hands that shaped them. This could have been an era of balance, of evolution, of catharsis. Instead, it became a maze of missteps. A place where potential is dangled, then dropped. Where women are lifted, but never carried. Where their triumphs are trimmed, and their flaws are feared. We are not angry because Marvel tried. We are heartbroken because it didn't try enough. The women of this universe deserved more than applause. They deserved arcs. They deserved memory. They deserved truth. And when we watch the next installment, we do so with cautious hearts. We cheer for moments, not momentum. We look for sparks in stories that once promised flames, and we ask ourselves how long we'll keep hoping for change that never comes. But maybe it's not too late. Maybe all it takes is one story done right. One arc that burns instead of flickers. One woman who is written not to please, but to live. And from that one, a universe reborn.